Once upon a time there were two little girls named Deb. One little girl grew up to be a preacher while the other grew up to be a pagan, and they both grew up to be the very best of friends. Join the preacher and the pagan as they take a fresh look at Christianity, from the inside out and the outside in.
Thank you for joining the Preacher and the Pagan. I'm Deb Bodwin, and I'm here with my dear friend Deb Sutter up in Canada. How you doing, Deb?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Deb?
I am enjoying the frigid weather. We're down to 2 digit degrees as opposed to 3, and it's almost like giddy. I need a jacket.
I was going to say, I'm the one that's down to 2 degrees, and that's the actual number.
I'm so sorry. I don't know how you guys handle that snow and stuff. I'm just like, gross.
Well, every 3 months we're ready for a major season shift, and we're in the middle of it.
Okay.
A Canadian is defined by how much they say sorry, how nice they are, and how much they hate the weather.
And by the way, I'm just going to date this episode. Happy belated Thanksgiving. I know you guys celebrated that this week.
Yes, we did. I had the whole gang here, all my kids and their partners and my add-ons. It was fantastic. I just loved it.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing somebody talking about getting ready for Thanksgiving on a Monday. That to my US ears, that just sounds so strange. But
I actually had an American one time saying, "Why are you getting ready so early?" It's like, because we're not the States.
Yeah, it does sound strange hearing somebody talk about getting ready for Thanksgiving before Halloween. But hey, you know what? Vive la différence, right?
Well, yeah, because it makes no sense for us to hear someone talking about Thanksgiving as the kickoff to the Christmas season. That what? why are you even doing that? So yeah, it's a very, very different experience, both north and south of the border.
Well, that's a good segue into our topic for today, which is different ways of experiencing the faith, structured versus non-structured, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a conversation that I've found myself part of a lot lately. I was asked twice from different congregations in the last few weeks if my children are people of faith, if they're church attenders. And I've had to kind of massage that answer because they will only go to church, the service with me for Easter and Christmas Eve, simply because they love me. And I don't push them for anything else. But they are very well versed in the faith and in the tradition. And they have a very Christ focused, meaning social justice focused outlook on life. And it leads to some interesting conversations, because I think I've mentioned in this podcast before. I certainly know I've mentioned in person that every 500 years, the Christian community, the large ecclesia, the large church itself, goes through a major change, and some of that's political and some of it's social. And I think like we're in the middle of one of those changes right now. Mm-hmm. And I think what is emerging for me anyway is our need to rethink what identity as a Christianity looks like. If we are only looking at bums in seats, then we've got a problem. But if we're looking at people who are genuinely taking the Christian message to change the world towards equity for all, I think we're doing fine. And on that equity, I think, is also where we're able to have far better conversations with people of other traditions than if we just remain within our buildings, our doctrinal truths kind of thing.
Absolutely. And that false equivalency, that an idea, I don't know if it's an actual false equivalency, but this idea that you have to equate church going with being a person of faith, mm-hmm. It's something I've struggled with for a long time, because when I was a Catholic, the people who followed the teachings of Jesus didn't really go to church all that much. And some of the people who were there every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesday nights could be the least Christ-like people I've known. So,
Mhm.
and it's different in the pagan tradition because it's so fragmented and so complex as far as you've got conservatives, you've got liberals, you've got feminists, you've got, God bless them, the men's rights types, they have the right to their place too. But there's not this idea that there's only one way to do it. And
Mhm.
I think in some ways that is gives you a lot more freedom as a pagan to say, look, I can define what my faith looks like. The tenets of the faith stay the same, but what it looks like in practice is an individual thing.
Yeah. And I think uh, I think we as a Christian community have to start looking at the reality of the world around us as opposed to trying to get that reality back to a past experience. And I mean, it's part of my website, Barefoot Evangelist. I've got a community all over the world that I don't talk to, but wants to hear like some wisdom for the week ahead, and wants to have some kind of connection. But and they might be part of a community somewhere else, they might not be, I honestly don't know. But there is an attraction for hearing part of the historic Christian tradition, but not as much interest in participating in the typical, and I'll say typical because it's not historic, worship that is done most times today. And I think that, yeah, as a pagan community, you probably have a lot more comfort in um, disassociation, maybe is the word. I'm not sure. Um, that you don't have this identity of denominationalism hanging over your head like a Damocles sword.
There, I'll be honest with you, it varies from tradition to tradition. I personally got into paganism through my own research and my own spiritual quest. My wife, who is a practicing witch, was part of a coven and she was trained in certain hierarchies, certain rituals. So it, it's some people like Catherine needs, she not needs, but she actually thrives with ritual and she
Yeah.
thrives with community, whereas I shut down and that sort of thing. So it's more of a, how does the faith best serve you? In what way is that message given to you the best, that you can go out and practice this faith in the best way possible? And I don't think that's a bad idea for all faiths, is to say that, don't mold the people to fit the faith, but marry the people and the faith so that the realities of both can have the most effective and positive benefit.
Yeah. And I mean, ritual's important. There's a reason why these things get developed, and community is absolutely essential for us as a species. Um, but forced community is not necessarily
Community.
living.
It's not community.
Yeah.
It's slavery.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, Christianity, one of the things that we have to wrestle with is that we, for the longest time, enforced ourselves as the universal voice. And part of, I mean, I guess it's part of the privilege unlearning that has to happen for all in a lot of areas in our society, is how do we not assume pride of place? How do we find community, and how do we find meaningful worship experiences in a world that has a lot of assumptions about what we do when we're in church?
I
Makes sense.
honestly think that the most important thing right now, I, everybody thinks faith is so important, but you know what I think is even more important is curiosity. Is opening yourself to the fact that there is more out there in your faith. Even if you're a Christian, there's more than you know. There's no more than you've been told. There's more than you've read. And if you open yourself up, if you actually become actively curious and talk to people and ask people, you will learn more and you will open yourself up more to your faith than you could have ever imagined possibly. And a lot of people are afraid of that opening. A lot of people are afraid of their faith or their world being bigger than what they expect. And that keeps a lot of people from digging deeper, moving forward, and trying to understand more. But if you have a well-developed sense of curiosity, you really can't stop it. It's a freight train. You're just helpless. Hang on and stay safe. You know.
No, that absolutely is true. But I think for a lot of people, the definition of faith is a community of identity and comfort, which is not a good definition, but people are looking, I think, often to their faith traditions, whatever those look like, to have some measure of assuredness.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
and that's a getting towards religiosity, not completely there yet, but it's on the road. Yeah, the whole idea of being of the intellectual curiosity being diametrically opposed to religious beliefs, I think is part of the problem. And I think increasingly our society is open to having these conversations across faith lines. Um, I'm often having to remind people that a lot of the conversations, just even with our Jewish siblings as Christians, that's just a few decades old. Our conversations with our Muslim siblings are even younger.
Mm-hmm.
Pagans, I mean, aside from casual conversations, there's no real acknowledgement in most of the world I've looked at. But that's within my lifetime, our lifetime, that
Mm-hmm.
so much of that has opened up, and that is so healthy. And people
Yes.
are might be leaving traditions, but they're not leaving the the inspiration for those traditions, the holy books or the practices. The only concern I have is those who have stepped so far outside of tradition that they are now adrift. And when they're looking to anchor, they start to make up a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. And the Christian community, a lot of the right wing falls into that,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like right wing Catholic or right wing Pentecostal. Like the extremes lack so much history that they just kind of invent things along the way, and that's problematic too to the program, because it's not the least bit representative of where the tradition has been, what it's come through.
Right.
It's very
And
limited stuff.
I honestly think that if that is more of an issue, if it is married to the idea that this is law, that this is
Mm-hmm.
all truth, this is the truth. Whereas if at a certain point in intellectual curiosity, you have to accept the fact that there is no such thing as absolute truth, that
Yeah,
is all relative,
yeah,
and that you have to find the spirit behind the so-called truth.
right. And the understanding that religion is a lens. It's
Yes.
not it's not a rule book, and I think that is something that people want to hear more of because they instinctively understand that to be true. But more leaders have to be saying that. More permission has to be given around um, understanding that there are things that we look at in scripture, there's things we look at in history, the things we look at in practice, which we can say, oh my God, that was then. We are so not a part of that now. Um,
And
and
it's
have that not damage our identity as people who are still struggling to live some kind of faith reality based on what we think would be the better path.
well, and I see, and that's where my break comes, because I don't understand why it's so hard to just change the perspective. There is a certain type of person who wants absolute rules, and they don't want any kind of, they don't want it open to interpretation, because then that makes it dangerous in their eyes. um it's an idea of not being comfortable with a certain degree of fluidity. And you know these people, we all know these people, that if it's not rock solid, they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that does not jibe with the reality of the universe. There is literally no such thing as rock solid. A rock is porous. A rock is a bunch of crazy electrons dancing around. The reality is there is no rock solid, but some
No, but
people need to
be
believe that.
yeah. Yeah. And how do you maneuver between the people who are wanting to do that personal exploration with under the umbrella of a particular faith tradition, or even explore uh, combinations thereof,
Mhm.
with that tradition, that or that lived expectation that they needed something solid. See, I'm of the opinion that the better educated a person is in the humanities, the less they're concerned with rock solid, because it reminds themselves that it's not the case. And I think increasingly we are not educating people enough on, or we're educating people in a very limited way on just our social histories, that all of this is ever changing. I mean, the church was never ever about one thing. Um, uh, the pagan traditions were never ever about just one thing.
Oh God, no.
To assume that there is one universal that we can all ultimately glom onto is naive at best.
And some of it is a personality trait. Some of it is, this is just who this person is. But you're right. A lot of it is not exposing people to contradictory yet okay ideas. This idea that contradictory is absolutely wrong and bad is dangerous, because you've got to have those contradictory ideas if you're going to weigh and balance and come to your own conclusions. If everything is uniform, if everything is exactly alike, there is no impetus for growth. There is no impetus for evolution, because it's just stagnant.
Yeah.
It's in that conflict, it's in that discomfort that we actually find progress and growth.
Yep. Add that to the reality that we're talking, in most religious traditions, thousands of years of texts and practices that are not necessarily easily accessible or understood in our modern context.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a whole lot of rugged ground.
Yeah. And
There's
that, yeah, and I understand the allure, because I mean, look out the window. It is a scary, scary time. And the desire to cling for what is familiar and safe and traditional, and not demanding psychologically or emotionally or intellectually, it's very real. That desire is very real. I feel it myself. I watch cartoons when it should have been watching the news, because sometimes I just can't look at the news. I can't work that hard. But you can't just spend your whole life looking at cartoons. Sometimes you got to watch the news. Sometimes you got to do the work.
And you also have to, or we, not you, we have to also realize that we're part of a narrative. We're not the only part of the narrative. We're part of something far more extensive that kind of weaves into the darkness and weaves back out again. And sometimes that weaving is a very short period of time, and sometimes it's quite long in our perspective, but that there's always hope, which is ultimately what religion is for. It's
Yes.
not for manipulating God, it's for reminding ourselves and each other that there is hope. There is something to work for. There are rules and standards of behavior, not necessarily sureties, but behavior that we can participate in that ultimately get us to that better goal. Um, uh, One of the things that I'm constantly trying to bring up with people is how simple Christianity is. That, Jesus laid out the floor mat as to how we're supposed to behave. Feed people, clothe people, take care of people, make sure they've got medical needs met, make sure they're comforted, treat everybody equally. Everybody's your friend. No one's a stranger. No one needs to be left out. Like, these are all basic Christian principles.
Mm-hmm.
That's all Christianity is. And so when I say that I see that in the world, great. I do not fear that my tradition is dying. When I go to church on Sunday and count heads and I'm still got some fingers left over, that's a different perspective on whether or not the message is getting through.
Right. Well, and again, the transmission of messages, that changes.
Yeah.
Used to be the only way you could get a message out would be to go to the center of town and ring a bell and hope everybody comes out and yell it at the top of your lungs. Then you could write a newspaper or a book, and now you can go on television, or the methods of disseminating information get more and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see a lot of people going out into the center of town with bells anymore, but that message is still getting out.
It really is. And I think, as well, I can only speak for the Christian community, we need to start changing our methods of interaction. I mean, COVID actually, in the irony of ironies of COVID, was that it opened up a whole world of that communication, of opportunities to engage people, that we didn't have before, because too many people were too scared to buy into mass media and internet connections. But we were forced to do that 3 years ago. And I have yet to meet very many people who want to go back to the way things were, which I think is really encouraging. The downside is the element of, can you craft the message so that it doesn't pick up a whole bunch of batshit, is now out of our hands. That's left the building.
Well, that left the building long before COVID, my friend, but that's
yeah,
okay.
I was just thinking that as I was saying that. There was a lot of batshit out there.
But I mean, you bring up a good point, and this brings me to something I wanted to say, that before COVID, did you ever think Barefoot Evangelist would have its own little spot on the tiki-taki?
No, I mean, I always thought that there would be something in the future, but to like be propelled, because I'm just as Gen X as anybody else is, that I understand about a quarter of the technology I try to use, and
Yes.
I'm overwhelmed by everything else. But yeah, I mean, thanks to you, that's something else that I'm now trying to work into.
This is my little plug, Barefoot Evangelist. Search it on the TikTok, because she is there. And hopefully I will, intimidate her into putting more than 3 TikToks on there. Hint, hint.
Yeah, I know. I went camping and then I got back home and everything else kind of got busy. We had Thanksgiving here, in case you hadn't noticed. I had 10 people.
I do. But yeah, I've found on that's the funny thing is, I get so many good messages. I follow I follow almost as many Christians as I do pagans on TikTok, simply because the method of getting those messages out, you get more diverse messages. You get more things like we talk about, things that tie faith to the outer world. Now, granted, there is also a bunch of really yucky stuff on TikTok, and I try very hard to filter that out. But
Recently, I've watched something that talked about God's opinion on mascara.
Oh, you saw that one, huh?
Oh my, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Quite frankly, as long as there's no exploitation, God doesn't care.
I want
Have you
God to
fed
wake
people
up.
today? Have you done something for someone else? That's the real thing.
Yes. And with every form of communication, whether it's choosing choosing what congregation to be part of, to filtering out your TikTok for you page, there is going to be a whole lot of information thrown at you, and a lot of it is going to be crap.
Mhm.
But your job as an intelligent human being is to filter out the crap and find the gems.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully, as more people become comfortable with technology, as more generations are stepping up and realizing that there is something to this message of faith that we have,
Mhm.
um, more of that stuff's out there. So there's more gems
Yeah.
to find.
And you can get those gems in a church. You can sit your butt down on Sunday morning and listen to a preacher, or you can go to a coven and have a wonderful congregation circle. You can do those. Those are absolutely viable ways to get the message across and to share the message. But there are also other ways. There are all kinds of ways to practice your faith that are absolutely viable, and you don't have to feel like you are less a part of your faith just because you don't go to church on Sunday. But if you read your Bible, or if you follow your faith and you do your own solitary practice as a pagan, or if you follow the traditions, you can still practice that faith. I
And
don't obviously can't speak for all
vital.
faiths.
Practice is vital. And that's one of the things that I find even with traditional communities is trying to explain that practice is something that we have to do and make that commitment to individually. Going to church is a habit, but it's not necessarily a practice of faith. And that understanding of practice, I think, really needs to have some work and massaging done to it. I've often explained it to children, like, you practice a musical instrument. You don't show up at the concert and being able to play, or you practice hockey. You don't show up at the rink thinking that you can stick handle. You've got to actually put the time in first
Mhm.
when there's no pressure. But people don't realize that that's what you also have to do with your faith life. Because if you show up in a crisis, your faith is not going to be there. You need to practice it to have it in place, whatever version of it feels authentic to you. But you've got to work on it. It's not just a gimme in the moment.
And there is that cynical Catholic thing that I grew up with, whereas, you say, oh, yeah, you see them at the bars on Saturday and then you see them in church Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I've
it,
always never understood. Like, is that supposed to insult one of them?
no, it was a matter of what that implies is you sin all week knowing that on Sunday you can go in and go to confession and have everything wiped away, and then just go back and sin again next week, and then go. It was this idea of hypocrisy.
Oh yeah, no, I get that, but it's always funny to me that they pick bars. It's like most of the
Because that's
Christian
what those
ministers
people
I know
did.
would spend time in bars on Saturday night if they could, if they were
You
preparing for services.
Yeah, maybe you haven't been to a lot of bars in Louisiana, New Orleans. It can get pretty rowdy and un-Catholic like there. You know, remember, we are the people that gave you American Mardi. Well, actually, Mississippi will fight us on that. But anyway, we popularized Mardi Gras. So bars on Saturday nights in Louisiana are a little bit different from bars on Saturday nights in some other places. They get
What, you
rowdy.
mean up here where we're all wearing plaid and we have to worry about the moose and the bears coming up to the door?
Well, you know what? Just don't give the moose a beer, okay? I have seen some of those meese, mouse, whatever the hell they're called.
They do
Those
have a
big
plural.
giant animals up there that I've
Yeah,
seen pictures of them.
yeah. Anyway, getting back to the bar metaphor, I always thought it was humorous because I
Oh,
think a
yes.
bar is the perfect place to have a church service.
Oh, you would.
There's also a little bit of Canuck Yankee thing going on here too.
I
Or no,
love it.
you're not a Yankee, American.
I'm not even Yankee American. I don't know what I am. I am a wanderer in my own country. I don't fit really anywhere. So it's all good.
You know, on that point, a lot of people come to talk to me, feel the exact same thing. So maybe we got to get over ourselves that we assume that we belong and recognize that everybody's wandering. And sometimes we just run into each other.
You know what? And that you never know who you're going to meet when you're wandering. Sometimes you meet some really fun people. You know?
Indeed. Yep.
And sometimes you meet some jerks, but that's the luck of the draw.
My dad always used to say, you got to know the people around you so you know when to cross the street.
I like that. But yeah, I mean, I think embracing the complexity of life and faith and all of that is the first step in surviving,
Mm-hmm.
because we all feel like we're on the edge of oblivion at this point. Every time you turn around, something else is happening. And are you going to be drowned by the tidal wave, or are you going to hop a surfboard and just ride it to the next thing?
Yeah. Well, and that I think is the gift of faith that it provides multiple transit opportunities so you can ride the onslaught. But I remember being asked years and years ago where I thought Christian faith was going to go. And I did not have an answer then. I think I've got a better answer now. And that is what we've been discussing, that there's a personal sense of developing things outside of what appears like tradition, although as the historian I can tell you that many many times during history people have gone off and done their own thing. But I think that's where the future is heading, is that more of an independence, less of a sense of denominationalism.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think as we are, I think this is an overall sensation as we're becoming more globally connected. These old power structures, these old concepts of what forms civilization are going to have to adjust, because I can talk to my friend in Ottawa who is literally catty corner across the continent from me, and we can have a conversation. This has never been possible before in history.
Yep.
And we have to redefine our understanding of culture and the world now because this is available. We are more connected now than we ever have been.
Yeah. What does
And
it mean?
how does this affect our faith? How does this affect our communities?
Mm-hmm.
What is community anymore?
Yes. Yeah. And how do you make connections?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And looking at how geography is actually a rather stifling way to do that.
Yeah. We dang, we getting deep, son. I love it. See, this is why we wait until the last moment, because man, we get some ideas going. Yeah, that's why we wait till the last moment. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, not that we're natural procrastinators and realize, oh my heavens, it's almost the 15th of the month. Got to do this.
Literally every month, we're like, we need to do some extra episodes so we have some banked up so we're not always running behind. Yeah, that.
We did that at first. We were okay then, but I think our topics are getting a little broader and a little deeper as we go.
that. I think that's good. I mean, it's wonderful to talk about the, I love the talks about the Bible that we do, but I also think it's really important because we're not just talking to Christians, we're talking to anyone of any faith who wants to learn more. And these are the conversations we have to have.
Absolutely. And the praxis that you must combine with belief. It's not simply a cerebral exercise. You actually have to literally embody what you believe.
Mm-hmm. And that is a bit of a challenge for some people, and it is completely natural to others.
Which is why I think that, generally speaking, faith lives of most people are going to be just fine as we continue on. As we become more comfortable talking about it openly, it is no longer going to be seen by certain members of our society as dismissive elitism, that there's actually value to believing in something bigger than ourselves.
And as we get away from this idea that there is a rock solid absolute, some of these people who have rejected it because, well, it doesn't fit in with the reality of the lived universe, may catch the message behind the tradition that has been thrown out with the bathwater.
Yes, I get a lot of comments, especially with younger people like that. They, and older people as well. I've been told by many people that they don't mind having conversations about faith with me because I'm not proselytizing.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is the key. Not necessarily only this assumption of a monolith, but that we can't be shoving it at people, our version at people, but opening the doors, opening that conversation.
Exactly.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. And the majority of people I've encountered who say they're not going to have anything to do with faith because, and they list off X, Y, Z, and it's like, yeah, if that was what I believed, I wouldn't be part of that anyway. Exactly. So I think there is a lot of perception changing that needs to happen in all aspects.
Absolutely. And it all begins with talking, which is what you and I do every month. A little bit more frequently than that, but we record it every month.
We record it for posterity every month.
Okay. Well, we're under a minute now, my friend, and I think we have had a lovely conversation. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm really glad we got to knot this one a bit.
Oh yeah. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us for this half hour. I'm Deb Bodwin.
And I'm Deb Suttard.
And this is The Preacher and the Pagan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, all.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Preacher and the Pagan with Deborah Suttard and Deborah Bodwin. This podcast is a two-lady podcast production in conjunction with the Barefoot Evangelist. Our producer and sound editor is Catherine Gordon. Our theme music was composed by Deborah Bodwin. You can reach us at thepreacherandthepagan@gmail.com or by visiting our website at barefootevangelist.ca/podcast.